Developing right now on Morning News Now, the cost of war. This morning, Iran rallying around its new supreme leader as the attacks on Tehran's oil facilities send oil prices on a roller coaster ride. Now, Iran vowing to keep its oil from leaving the Middle East, while President Trump warns there will be consequences.
I will not allow a terrorist regime to hold the world hostage and attempt to stop the globe's oil supply. And if Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level.
Also, new video shows what appears to be a U.S. Tomahawk striking near a school where more than 170 people were killed. We will bring you the latest from the Mideast to Washington. Also this morning, turbulence at airports across the country. A partial government shutdown causing staffing shortages for the TSA. We'll get an update on the funding fight as the frustration grows. Plus, a reminder to take your vitamins. There's new evidence that those daily supplements could actually slow aging. We will look at the research and what doctors want you to know. And it's a quick fix for stress relief on your busiest days. We will break down how a 90-second reset could make all the difference for your mental health. It could be all it takes, 90 seconds.
We can all find 90 seconds. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We are going to begin this Tuesday morning, of course, with the ongoing war in the Middle East. Iranians are celebrating their new supreme leader, Moshtaba Khamenei. He's the son of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was assassinated in an airstrike 10 days ago. But those celebrations come as Iran launches missiles and drones at their Gulf state neighbors and Israel, targeting critical infrastructure like power plants, hotels, airports, and data centers.
Back in the U.S. last night, Vice President J.D. Vance attended the dignified transfer for the 7th U.S. service member killed in the war with Iran. His name is Sergeant Benjamin N. Pennington. He was a member of the Army's 1st Space Battalion and 1st Space Brigade. He was from Glendale, Kentucky, and died on the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Here at home, anxiety looms over the surge in oil prices. The price of crude oil passed $100 a barrel for the first time since 2022 yesterday. Things then did settle back down after President Trump told reporters the war will be over very soon. But the Trump administration is also sending mixed messages. The president also agreed with Secretary Pete Hegseth that this is just the beginning.
We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
We have a team of correspondents and analysts joining us this morning to break down the latest from the ongoing war with Iran and its widening economic impact. Let's start with NBC's Matt Bradley in Israel. So, Matt, what is the latest from the ground where you are?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing here now is a somewhat stabilizing situation, but one that's still surrounded by war. We saw that there were actually 2 deaths yesterday here in Israel from Iranian ballistic missiles and projectiles. Those are the first deaths we've seen in more than a week. As we've heard from the IDF, that the number of missiles per Iranian salvo has really decreased. And people that I've been speaking to who are close to the security establishment here say that while we're still getting alerts all day long, all night long, we're not seeing the same kind of ferocity, the same number in each salvo as we were before. In many ways, that is part of the Iranian response. By firing smaller numbers of missiles, it makes it easier for those missiles to evade some of Israel's formidable air defenses. Now, the number of injuries has continued to remain about in the hundreds. Important to note here, guys, when we talk about injuries, the vast majority of people who have been injured in the past week here in Israel have been injured trying to run to those shelters by tripping and falling or having a panic attack or a heart attack in some cases. There have been motorway accidents that have hurt or even killed people because of these sirens. That's about 3 times the number of people who have been injured trying to get to those shelters than those who have been injured actually having to take in those missile launches and getting injured from shrapnel or other things.
Matt, Iranians have gathered to celebrate their new supreme leader over the past several days. Tell us, though, about the response from the U.S. and Israel to this choice, Moshtaba Khamenei, his appointment.
Yeah, we haven't heard much from Israel about this. This was something that was widely anticipated even long before October 7th and the attacks on Iran over the past couple of years. Moshtaba Khamenei was the heir apparent, even though his election really flies in the face of everything that the Islamic Republic really stands for ideologically. Their constitution expressly forbids inherited succession of power, simply as a result, as a reaction to the regime that this regime ousted, that of the Shah, where power was passed from father to son. Now, President Trump not happy with this selection. He said, "I'm not happy." He's also said that that this is something that he was against. He had said earlier, kind of hinted that the big problem here, the worst case scenario, would be if a bigger hardliner, if a more conservative justice took over leadership of Iran. Well, that is exactly what happened. Mujtaba Khamenei is close to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. He is very much against the reformers in the Iranian government who have made real entreaties to the West, in part by pledging to curb Iran's nuclear program. This is exactly the kind of person that experts had warned could take over in Iran.
Let's bring in Raf Sanchez, who is in London for more on the war's impact just across the Middle East. So we know as the U.S. and Israel continue to strike inside Iran, the Islamic Republic is now targeting critical infrastructure in Israel, also its Gulf Arab neighbors. We're talking about important civilian locations, hotels, airports, power plants, data centers. Raf, what's been the impact of these strikes?
So, Joe, the most obvious impact is just this worldwide travel chaos that you're seeing. Hundreds of flights canceled, thousands and thousands of passengers, including Americans, stranded, unable to get where they're trying to go. Dubai is the busiest international airport in the world. Its flight schedule has been very badly impacted by this. And what you've seen is that Iran has basically been able to bring a level of chaos to its Gulf Arab neighbors that they are not used to. Countries like the UAE, like Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they're in the Middle East, but they've been largely insulated from a lot of the violence, a lot of the unrest in recent years. And now they are feeling it very, very distinctly. And this seems to be a deliberate Iranian strategy. Whether it is an effective strategy, the jury is still out, I would say. The Iranians basically putting these Gulf countries under a lot of military pressure in the hope that they will in then turn put pressure on Washington to end this war. Iran's explanation is that these countries host American military bases, which is true, but most of those military bases were emptied out before the start of this war. And we are seeing Iran targeting civilian infrastructure, including hotels, apartment buildings. And guys, the thing that these countries have really struggled with are these relatively small, low-cost Iranian drones, which seem to be getting through their air defenses in medium, large numbers. Guys.
Raf, I also want to talk about oil and the Strait of Hormuz. A spokesperson for Iran's Revolutionary Guard said Iran will block that export of crude oil from the region if the U.S. and Israel continue their attacks. Trump has warned Iran not to block shipping through this area, through the Strait of Hormuz, which is essentially shut down right now. How is this standoff on oil changing the dynamics of the war?
Right, Savannah. So we saw oil prices yesterday spiking to nearly $120 a barrel. They came back down. They're now a little bit below 90. And that is in response to President Trump indicating that the war may be close to concluding. But as you mentioned in the introduction, he then went on to send pretty mixed signals in that press conference down in Florida. And so there's no reason that those oil prices won't go back up again if the markets begin to believe that this chaos that they're seeing right now in the Strait of Hormuz is going to continue for some time. And this seems to be the absolute core of Iran's strategy going forward. They know that they cannot defeat the United States and Israel militarily. They're not going to be able to fend off the warplanes from these two countries. What they are able to do is effectively close the Straits of Hormuz, drive up oil prices everywhere, inflict economic pain on everyone, and they hope that at a certain point, President Trump will feel the pressure to call this war off in response to Americans paying more at the gas pump, to potentially inflation across the board as a result of these higher oil prices. And what's been notable, the U.S. has had a lot of success in destroying the Iranian Navy, but the Iranians do not need their Navy to effectively close the Straits of Hormuz. Just the geography, the fact that their land forces can threaten the Straits, seems to be enough to deter shipping. Guys.
Right. Raph Sanchez, Matt Bradley, thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it.
Well, let's get more on that we were just discussing, because uncertainty over the war in the Middle East is continuing to rattle financial markets. Oil prices went on a roller coaster ride yesterday, initially topping $100 a barrel before ending the day below that mark.
It was a similar story for U.S. stocks, which opened firmly in the red before closing higher. The turnaround came after President Trump suggested the war could be ending soon, adding that he was focused on keeping energy and oil flowing in the world. Here's a little bit more about what he said yesterday.
We're looking to keep the oil prices down. We went artificially up because of this excursion. I knew oil prices would go up if I did this, and they've gone up probably less than I thought they'd go up.
Caleb Silver joins us now. He's Investopedia's editor-in-chief and the chief business editor of People Inc. Caleb, good morning. So another bumpy day for Wall Street yesterday. Help us understand all these moves we saw in both the stock and oil markets, and how's it shaping up today?
Yeah, it's all about headline risk, and the stock market is moving with these headlines or whatever the president says or doesn't say, and so do oil prices. But the important thing to know is that oil prices are always trading in the future. We're always trading in the future price of oil, what the price of oil might be next month or the month after, and it trades 23 hours a day, which is why you see so much volatility. It went up to $120 a barrel yesterday morning, down now to about $90 a barrel. It's not as if physical oil is being moved. It's just the contracts for future oil are being moved, but it does have an impact on gas prices. For every dollar move in oil prices, you get about a 2 to 3 cent move in the price of gasoline. And we're starting to see that gas is up some 30% higher than it was just a month ago. But this is a stock market and an oil market that is reacting to these headlines, and without clear policy or a clear direction where this is going, you're going to see a lot of that volatility until this ends.
Caleb, you talk about headlines. There was one made yesterday where President Trump spoke with NBC News, and he refused to rule out seizing Iran's oil. In response, we know the Iranian Revolutionary Guard says it would not allow 1 liter of oil to leave the Middle East. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. But besides that, we know this is impacting gas prices. I think the question a lot of people have right now is, how high could those prices get?
Yeah, we'll take it back to 2008 and 2009. Oil prices spiked up to about $130 a barrel, and gas prices spiked up to about $4 or $5 a gallon. I'm down here in South Florida. Gas prices are already about $4.50, the national average being about $3.50. But remember, it was $2.90 just a month ago. So it's about a 2-week lag between oil prices rising and gas prices rising along with them, although you see retailers start to move those prices a little bit more aggressively. The thing about oil and gas prices, they go up pretty fast, but it takes them a long time to come down because those prices get locked in, and then companies, big companies or airlines, lock in their oil prices going forward. We already heard from United Airlines saying these higher oil prices are going to mean higher ticket fares eventually if they remain high.
Caleb, we've been talking about these growing concerns about stagflation for the global economy. Remind us what exactly that means. What are the risks? Because this is kind of a worst case scenario.
Yeah, stagflation, not a bad Tom Hanks movie from the 1980s. That is where you have higher inflation, rising prices, slower growth, and slowing employment. And we saw from that jobs report that we covered last week for the month of February, the United States lost 92,000 jobs, and prices are rising, and oil prices have a way of making everything more expensive because they're critical to the supply chain. But also, there's a lot of derivative products from oil. There's the plastics that come from oil. There's fertilizer that comes from oil, and then oil to be used for transport. If you look at the oil prices, the one that's been hitting the most, and the gas prices, it's diesel. That's because a lot of that comes through the oil that's refined in the Middle East. So you're seeing farmers hurt by that. You're seeing truckers hurt by that, and the airlines hurt by that. They use diesel the most.
So with that in mind, if you're the Federal Reserve and the goal is to try and stop inflation, but also to kind of get the economy revving a little bit, are they kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place? When they meet next week, what do?
Yeah, well, they're stuck in a hard place because the labor market is one thing that they're super concerned about, and that has been slowing undeniably. That said, if they lower interest rates right now, that could cause even more inflation at a time where these oil prices are going to cause inflation. So they probably won't do anything because the data is not that secure yet, and they don't know the direction that this war is going to take because the president seems to keep changing his mind a lot.
All right. Caleb Silver, good to have you with us. Let's pick it up from there. We've been talking about these mixed messages from President Trump. They are leading to these swirling questions around the timeline for the U.S. military's campaign against Iran. The president spoke on a variety of topics at a House Republicans' annual policy retreat in Florida yesterday. During his 50-minute speech, President Trump called the war a, quote, short-term excursion, but he later went on to offer new threats against Iran with a warning of intensifying strikes. Let's bring in NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, let's start with these mixed messages we've been talking about all morning. The president spoke extensively on the war in that event with House Republicans and campaign donors. Walk us through what appear to be these inconsistent statements when it comes to just how long the war might last.
Yes, certainly mixed messages and inconsistent statements, guys. The president did not put a timeline on this war in terms of when it will end, and those watching the speech for clues will probably come away more confused after watching it. So let's go through some of it. The president called it a little excursion and a short-term excursion that the U.S. is getting very close to finishing. These are all his words. He said we could call it a tremendous success right now, or we could go further, and we're going to go further, he said, especially if Iran acts to curtail ships in the Strait of Hormuz, which, as you just talked about, is important to oil flow in the midst of fears of rising gas prices. Take a look at what the president posted on Truth Social after the speech regarding Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. Quote, they will be hit by the United States of America 20 times harder than they have been hit thus far, end quote. And he was asked about how this could end soon, while Defense Secretary Hegseth said the attacks so far are only just the beginning. And President Trump said, I think you could say both. It's unclear how you could square those two things. So, of course, we see more questions than answers here. And look, we have to see all of this hesitation in the midst of the political context here. There are serious economic concerns already, even before gas prices were rising. This was seen by Trump officials as one of the positives for him politically. And there's also the fact that early polls show that the country is not sold on this war. So you can imagine why the president is trying to downplay how long it might go.
Sahil, the president's also facing backlash for comments he made at another appearance yesterday. He continues to make the unfounded claim that Iran is responsible for the bombing of a school that left more than 170 people dead on the first day of the war, including children. We should note, experts say the U.S. is the only military involved in the war that uses Tomahawk missiles. So, Sahil, tell us what the president said and how there is this growing evidence that seems to contradict what he's saying.
Yeah, the main evidence is this video, as you mentioned, that's come out that experts say shows a U.S. Tomahawk missile striking the area. NBC News has reported that early U.S. assessments do indicate this was a U.S. missile that struck the girls' school and killed more than 160 people. The president claimed without evidence that this might actually be Iran, a claim that the U.S. military is not backing up. And the president was asked bluntly yesterday why he is the only one in his government making this claim. Let's play what he said.
Well, I haven't seen it, and I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries, you know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more, but whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a Tomahawk is very generic, it's sold to other countries, but that's being investigated right now.
And U.S. senators, including allies of President Trump, are not denying it was the U.S. Take a listen to what Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana said about that yesterday when I asked him.
It was terrible. We made a mistake. Other countries do that sort of thing intentionally, like Russia. We would never do that intentionally. I think the department is investigating it now, and I'm sorry. I'm just so sorry that happened. It was a mistake.
And other senators say they want a full investigation into how this could have happened. Joe.
Sahil, also this morning, we are expecting the Senate Armed Services Committee to hold a closed-door briefing on what's happening in Iran. What are some of the answers they're looking for?
So the details of this closed-door briefing are a little bit opaque, Joe. We asked some senators on the committee as to who's briefing them. They didn't even have an answer to that. But look, they have a lot of questions, which senators have been pretty public about regarding the war. They want to know what's the plan, what's the strategy, how long this will go. Again, even senators are not particularly clued in terms of what the end game is here. Is the president going to ask for more money? That's a question that's very pertinent to Congress. There are Democrats who are certainly going to ask about the legality of this going forward, the legal authority, which they don't believe the president had to begin with. So quite a lot of questions still for the administration to answer to the U.S. Congress.
All right, Sahil, thank you so much. Switching gears, the spring break travel season is now underway, but it might take travelers a little longer to get where they're going. Experts are warning people to be prepared for massive disruptions. Take a look at this. Security lines at some major airports are so long they're actually snaking out onto the curb, even into the parking garage. The primary reason, a partial government shutdown that's forcing some TSA officers to work without pay. Well, now some of them just aren't showing up. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello explains.
The start of a record-breaking spring break season, and again, long lines at some big airports. In Atlanta, the world's busiest. In Philly, time-lapse captured the long lines. In New Orleans, a packed terminal with lines extending to the parking garage. And hours-long lines yet again in Houston.
TSA line starts downstairs in baggage.
I've been waiting in line for about 2 hours now. When we were outside, way far away from the door, that was a little frightening. We're still hopeful because we're moving at this point.
NBC's Priscilla Thompson is there.
This is the scene at Hobby Airport in Houston. Security lines stretch across the entire top floor through baggage claim and snaking out onto the curb.
The reason for the long lines, the DHS shutdown over ICE policies. Caught in the middle, TSA officers and passengers.
They're just political footballs, basically, that are used as leverage points for political battles that they have nothing to do with.
After receiving half a paycheck 2 weeks ago, TSA officers will miss a full check this week, with most working paycheck to paycheck, and now some taking part-time work.
They have their fuel tanks and they need to fill up their stomachs. They have little kids that need to go to daycare.
Last fall, TSA officers went 3 weeks without getting paid, then waited another month for their back pay. And now, yet again, working without pay. Back to you.
Tom Costello, thank you. We are learning more about the 2 teens accused of an attempted bombing outside the mayor's residence here in New York. Investigators say both suspects pledged allegiance to ISIS while in custody after they were arrested over the weekend. Now they're both facing federal terrorism and weapons charges. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has the latest.
Just 1 hour before 2 devices were ignited but not detonated at a protest outside of New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's residence, authorities say that 2 suspects arrived from Pennsylvania to New York armed with explosives and inspired by ISIS. They are now facing 5 counts of terrorism charges as we're learning disturbing new details about what they told police. A chilling terror attack thwarted in the backyard of New York City's mayor. Chaos unfolding as demonstrators clashed and ran for safety.
This was not random violence. This was a planned attack motivated by extremist ideology.
The FBI says these 2 teenage suspects in counter-protesters stand accused of igniting 2 improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, and trying to detonate them in a crowd of anti-Islam demonstrators and counter-protesters outside the mayor's residence. One suspect is seen here, leapfrogging a man and hurling an object, which failed to detonate.
Had these IEDs functioned the way the perpetrators allegedly wanted them to, they could have caused death, destruction.
The NYPD says the nuts, bolts, and shrapnel were packed into the devices, at least one of which contained a highly explosive material that is extremely sensitive to impact, friction, and heat.
Both men were immediately taken into custody, and the devices they brought taken off of our streets.
19-year-old Ibrahim Kuyami and 18-year-old Amir Balat appearing in court this morning. Just prior, Balat holding up his finger in a gesture often used to show ISIS support. As the FBI and NYPD said both suspects repeatedly referenced the terror group after their arrest.
He requested paper and wrote a message declaring in part, "I pledge my allegiance to the Islamic State. Die in your rage."
The Pennsylvania pair facing 5 counts, including supporting a foreign terrorist organization. Balat's attorney telling NBC News he's 18 and he doesn't have any idea what he's doing, as attorneys for both men requested protective custody. The NYPD says it has no information at this time that would connect the investigation going on here in New York to what's happening overseas in Iran. Now, in the complaint, one of the suspects told the FBI that he wanted to do something that was, quote, bigger than the Boston Marathon bombing, where he said only 3 people died in that. Sam Brock, NBC News, New York. Back to you.
Could be a big weather day, so let's get right to your forecast. This morning, tens of millions of people are at risk for severe storms. Angie Lastman is here with that. Good morning, News Now weather. Angie, good morning.
Hi, Joe. Good morning. You said it. We've got the chance for some of those stronger storms to develop, and it's for a good chunk of the country. So let's start with what we're dealing with this morning. Fairly quiet for a lot of us. We've got quiet conditions across the Northeast, most of the Great Lakes, a little bit of snow falling for the upper Midwest, and then you'll see some of this, shower activity developing across parts of the South right now. And here's how it plays out as we get through the day today and even into tonight. We'll see the potential for a whole lot of storm activity across parts of the Southern Plains and stretching even up into parts of the Midwest, specifically the Ohio Valley. When you look at that severe risk, you can see there is an enhanced risk across a chunk of the country, up across parts of the Midwest, just on that border of Chicago, just north of St. Louis, I think is where we'll see the best chance of that. And then farther south, there's an enhanced risk that does include Dallas, stretching down to Sonora and down to the border, but really expansive. And the potential for those threats are going to be elevated. We've got the chance to see a couple of these strong tornadoes as well, hail and wind gusts on the table. But notice those EF2 tornadoes could potentially be anywhere across this region. So where you see this kind of lighter pinkish red shade, that's where we're looking at those stronger tornadoes to develop. And again, major cities, Cleveland, Chicago, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Dallas, Oklahoma City, all included in that. That's just today and into tonight. Tomorrow, that front will extend from New York all the way to Texas, and we'll see, again, the chance of some really heavy rain and some stronger storms. Not quite as big of a risk for tomorrow when it comes to severe weather, but still, we've got the chance to see some strong tornadoes, some wind gusts, and some hail, and not to mention the potential for some flooding. That goes through tomorrow. And then as we look ahead to Thursday, we're going to start to see that kind of slide off to the east as far as that front is concerned, but still some of those storms developing up across parts of New England, and will unfortunately be looking at some rain mixed with some wet snow. Yes, I know everybody is done with the wintry weather, but unfortunately we've still got some potential for that down the road in the next couple of days. Rainfall, though, I want you to watch places like Texas, Arkansas, where we could see those higher amounts, so upwards of maybe 2-3 inches. And that means that we do have that flood risk anywhere from really Dallas to Del Rio today. And then including the parts of the upper Midwest and the Ohio Valley, we're once again going to watch for that slight risk for flash flooding. So we've got kind of all of it on the table today, Joe. And over the next couple of days, with this chapter of the season developing, we'll likely see the potential lasting over at least the next couple of days.
It's hard to have like the 70-degree days and then know there's snow. It's like when you go in like the hot tub and then you like jump in the cold pool.
Yeah, it's
kind of like
a
that.
jolt.
Exactly, it's a jolt
to the system.
I like that word. All right, thanks, Angie. Appreciate it. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, supplements for longevity. New research reveals the key to slowing down aging could be right over the counter, what doctors want you to know. Up first after the break, 3 brothers now facing the potential of life in prison after they were found guilty in a massive sex trafficking case. Our Danny Savalos is here to break down the verdict and what comes next. Stay with us. Welcome back. 2 high-profile luxury real estate brokers and their brother were convicted in a federal sex trafficking case. A jury in New York found brothers Orenthal and Alon Alexander guilty on multiple counts, including rape, sex trafficking, conspiracy, and sexual exploitation. Prosecutors say the men used their wealth and their influence to lure women to parties and trips, then drug and sexually assault them. They say the crime spanned years. The brothers now face the possibility of life in prison. They have denied the allegations, and their attorneys say they plan to appeal. In a statement, U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton said, "This verdict cannot undo the effects of the heinous abuse the Alexanders' many victims endured, but it does send a message. New Yorkers want to bring an end to sex trafficking in all our communities." Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos with more on this case. Danny, good morning. So this trial featured testimony from more than 30 witnesses, including 11 accusers. 2 of those women say they were under 18 at the time they were assaulted. Bring us up to speed on what happened here. And at the end of the day, I mean, is what swayed the jury the fact that they heard from so many accusers, do you think?
Yes, but in addition, a very interesting thing I think was compelling for the jury. The defense's plan was to essentially accuse these victims of being gold diggers, people who were out for a quick buck. Well, it turns out that some of these victims were actually the children of billionaires or independently wealthy, had no need for money. And that is a compelling thing. Now, it doesn't mean in any way that wealthy people are more credible than not wealthy people. But if the defense's argument is that these folks are just trying to make a quick buck, well, that is a major, major piece of evidence against that theory for the defense.
The brothers now face the possibility of life in prison. No surprise, their attorneys say they plan to appeal. We actually heard from Orrin Alexander's defense lawyer after the verdict. Take a listen.
We're all disappointed with the verdict. In terms of appellate issues, we believe we have many appellate issues. We've objected repeatedly during the trial. We've preserved those issues. We believe they have merit, but this isn't the forum for that. We'll raise them at the appropriate time.
So what are some of the arguments you expect them to make on appeal?
Two major issues, probably the admission of evidence, and then the biggest point on appeal is always jury instructions. There's always a fight over jury instructions, what came in, what didn't. Now, their lawyers are not talking about what exactly those appellate issues are, but I'm going to be really candid with you, Joe. That's part of the standard speech we defense attorneys give on the courthouse steps after we lose. We're going to appeal. We have a ton of appellate issues. Don't really want to tell you about them right now.
Exactly. All right. So we know that this is beyond the appellate process, not the only legal troubles that the brothers face. There are dozens of civil lawsuits, and also two of the brothers face additional criminal charges in Florida. Walk us through. Is this case in New York sort of a predictor of some of the issues that will be present in those other cases? What's similar? What's different?
Well, I actually talked to Evan Torgan, one of the lawyers for some of the victims, and really, no surprise here. This is something that greatly aids the civil case, and here's why. Prosecutors have to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. That is a much higher standard than the civil standard of just preponderance of evidence. So if you're a civil attorney and you're going to bring claims related to conduct that is the subject of a criminal prosecution, then a lot of your case gets handed to you by the government proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt. So it only makes it easier for these victims to seek civil justice now that criminal justice has been meted out.
All right, Danny Savalos, good to have you with us. Thank you. Coming up, continuing coverage of the war with Iran. After another night of heavy bombarding on Tehran, our Richard Engel joins us next on Morning News Now. We're back with the latest on the war in the Middle East. Overnight, Iran came under heavy bombardment from American and Israeli strikes, with the turmoil in the region showing no signs of easing up. The Iranian Red Crescent says more than 1,200 people have now been killed. But Iran is also hitting back, with Gulf countries like Bahrain and Kuwait bearing the brunt of that retaliation. The attacks come after President Trump delivered more mixed messages about the war yesterday. He initially suggested it could end soon, before later adding the U.S. hadn't won enough. Take a listen.
We're achieving major strides toward completing our military objective. And some people could say they're pretty well complete. We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel now joins us from Tel Aviv. Richard, good to have you with us. Clearly mixed signals from President Trump making headlines here. Does Israel share the president's assessment the war is ahead of schedule? Just what's the latest where you are?
Well, here in Israel, they're not talking about a schedule. They haven't been lining it out that specifically, telling people that this is going to take 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, because, frankly, there is really no way of knowing. President Trump has apparently a list of military objectives. The military hasn't achieved them yet. But then there's the longer-term political objective. Where is this all going? You can hit as many targets in Iran as you like. You can destroy as many missiles. But then what do you do the day after? And without knowing that, without knowing the end game, it's very it is impossible to know how long this war could possibly last. So I think many analysts in Israel that are speaking on TV, that are writing in the newspapers, are worried. One second. Are worried about what the long-term strategy is. So they're not just talking strictly in military terms, that there's 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks less of targets to hit. It is what are the long-term repercussions of this, and is there an exit strategy?
Richard, we also want to ask you about that strike on an Iranian elementary school that killed scores of people, including children. NBC News has obtained and verified a video that does appear to show an American Tomahawk missile hitting that area of the school on February 28th, the first day of the war. What are we learning about this attack from munitions experts and the U.S. government response?
Well, the U.S. government response, well, let's say there's President Trump's response. President Trump so far casting doubt on that, saying he's not convinced that maybe it was somebody else's Tomahawk missile. But munitions experts believe quite strongly, looking at the weapon type, that this was fired by the United States. The U.S. was firing in the area. The U.S. uses Tomahawk missiles. The U.S. was launching major attacks very close to that school when the explosion took place. So multiple munitions experts say there is very little doubt that it was the United States that struck that school. No one is suggesting that they did it on purpose, but that it was a U.S. weapon that caused all that damage and killed, according to the Iranians, about 180 people. The number keeps going up, many of them children.
Richard, we've been discussing over the last several days how this conflict has expanded to Lebanon, and the situation there appears to be getting more dire by the day. The Lebanese government saying more than 500,000 people are now displaced as Israel intensifies its ground and air attacks focused on Hezbollah. What is the latest there?
So the war in Lebanon is obviously related to the war in Iran, but it is also a war within a war. For the first few days of this conflict, Hezbollah, which is a militia group that operates in southern Lebanon, in southern Beirut as well, it has long been supported by Iran. It believes strongly in the Iranian Islamic revolutionary ideology. It was founded with the help of Iran, although it does operate with a great deal of autonomy. It has its own weapons. It has its own leaderships. It has its own hierarchy, though it still operates in close coordination with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Well, Hezbollah joined the war and joined the war on Iran's side, and Israel quickly responded after Hezbollah fired rockets at northern Israel, fired rockets into this country, and now that war has its own momentum. So it's possible that even if there is some sort of peace deal between Iran and the United States, and if President Trump decides that he has won, quote, enough militarily, that war between Israel and Hezbollah continues because it has its own dynamic there, and it is extraordinarily violent. As you mentioned, hundreds of thousands of people on the move, about 500,000. Lebanon's entire population is only about 6 million, so we're talking roughly 10% of the population displaced so far.
Richard Engel, always appreciate your reporting. Thank you for joining us this morning. Coming up, a major airline resuming flights after a nationwide ground stop. Our Emily Lorsch has the details coming up in your Money Minute. Plus, proof that some people could actually be giving you gray hairs. We're going to name names. No, I'm kidding, but we will tell you what you can do about it. Coming up with your weekly check-in next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. JetBlue flights are back in the skies this morning after the airline ordered a brief ground stop earlier.
NBC News business and economy reporter Emily Lorsch has more details on that and your Money Minute. Good morning, Emily.
Good morning, guys. That's right. The stoppage was issued this morning after JetBlue requested the halt. That's according to the FAA. The airline, which services more than 100 destinations across the U.S., Europe, and the Caribbean, tells NBC News that the pause was due to a system outage. The airline saying it was resolved about an hour later and that operations have resumed. Over at Apple, the tech giant's push into AI is hitting delays. The company is postponing a new smart home display following setbacks developing an updated version of Siri. That's according to Bloomberg. The product had been expected this spring, but may now launch around September. We've reached out to Apple and haven't yet heard back. And Canada is reversing course on TikTok. The government now says the app can continue operating in the country after previously ordering its Canadian division to shut down regarding security concerns. Officials say TikTok Technology Canada will be allowed to operate under new commitments to strengthen data protections, including tighter controls on user information and independent monitoring. Now, guys, we know for years there was a ton of scrutiny here in the United States as well over TikTok's operations and ownership before the U.S. entity was created. And that was a time when we really saw how obsessed people were about TikTok.
The backlash was fierce.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Well, on the health front this morning, a new study suggests taking a daily multivitamin could help slow aging in older adults.
The research focused on what scientists call biological aging. That's basically how our bodies change and break down over time at the cellular level. Doctors say that process is tied to many chronic diseases. The study, published in the journal Nature Medicine, found older adults who took a daily multivitamin for 2 years showed their biological aging slowed it down by about 4 months.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel joins us with more on the study. Dr. Patel, great to see you. So it's followed over 900 healthy older adults with an average age of about 70 years old. What stood out to you in these findings?
Yeah, two things stood out. First of all, Joe and Savannah, we've been telling people for years, because we have plenty of studies that show that adding a multivitamin doesn't do much for your health. What was unique about this study is they took about 5 really, I would say, advanced DNA markers so that you could really look at that biological aging. These are not tests that we order in a standard office setting. And they found, as you discussed, that you can actually slow down that biological age. Remember, that's different than your chronological age. And often in many people, the two are different. Another thing that stood out in this study is that if your chronological age, let's say you're 70 in this study, but your biological age was much younger, that the vitamins could have an even more pronounced effect. So this means that the older you accelerate, there looks like there's some research that shows us that we can try to slow that trend down. Comes with a number of caveats, which we can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, guess what are some of the other factors that do influence your biological age?
Yes. So your biological age is a mix of, a lot of us will tell you, it's genes, it's lifestyle. It's so much of what we've been talking about on this show, like often, that you can improve this already. We don't necessarily need a multivitamin to do this, that we know that we can improve this with a lot of habits, including diet and sleep. We know that our social contact can do this. Obviously, eliminating smoking, doing things that we've talked about, like low processed foods, and then stress, which I know is, all of these things are hard, but in accumulation, we have plenty of research that shows that that can influence and actually reverse biological age.
And what were some of those caveats with taking a multivitamin you want us to keep in mind before you do?
I would say a couple of things. Number one, this is just one study. It's an important study. I think this is what I would describe a kind of a cutting edge set of studies that I will expect to see many more of, Savannah, around longevity research. Some people have heard about this: longevity, lifespan, health span, biological age. This is one I think that's going to be cited often, especially in the coming months, around longevity research. But the caveat that comes with that is that this was a very different population, a controlled population, 70 years old, mostly white, mostly kind of middle income, affluent. So not necessarily affected by all these kind of biological stressors that I just talked about. And then the second thing is that everybody's different. So while a multivitamin may not harm you, I think it's also leading some people, especially through social media, going down a rabbit hole, to think that you can maybe do some of those unhealthier things and take a vitamin and that they counteract each other. I simply know that that's not true, and that's not the case. So what I would say to people is have the discussion with your doctor, have a discussion with a dietitian, talk about all those other factors combined. But this is one of those studies that I'm going to keep my eye on and see what else we have in the literature that can either support or help to talk about the context for this.
You know, I come from a family where vitamins are like the gold standard. Like everyone just has a lot of vitamins all the time. But it may be what, like for younger people who are looking at vitamins, maybe it's not on their mind. What is some of the best advice? Is it a multivitamin? Is it just focusing on certain things where you have a deficiency? What do you usually tell people?
Right. Yeah, so first of all, your family, my family, even though I tell my mother all the same things, she's like, but will it hurt me? And I think that's what it comes down to, Joe. So what I would say to you is that no matter what age you are, have a discussion about, for example, I personally have to take vitamin D. I am so deficient in that. A multivitamin, a standard one, would never cover that deficiency. So I think it's incredibly important to have that kind of knowledge of what are my actual vitamins that I can both measure, do something about and have an impact on my health at any age. It's a great idea. My kids take a multivitamin because they don't get enough iron. So we have to supplement that way. So you're bringing up an incredible point, but make sure you say to the doctor, to your nutritionist, what is it that I need? And should I take just that? Or is there a vitamin that can get both of those things in adequate nutritional amounts for me? And don't forget, sunshine gives you plenty of vitamin D too. I'm going to try to get some of that today too.
It's a great reminder on a nice day.
Exactly.
Finally.
A lot of that today.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Patel.
Right. Moving from the body to the mind, time for your weekly mental health check. And we're going to start off with a study offering new hope to people who are dealing with childhood trauma.
Plus, we've got to look at a trending quick fix for managing stress.
Psychotherapist Dr. Robbie Ludwig joins us with that and more. She's also the author of the book, Your Best Age Is Now. That's great advice right there. Dr. Robbie, always good to have you with us. So let's talk about this new research about childhood trauma. Obviously, processing painful experiences from a young age can be tough. In some cases, those early wounds impact your health well into adulthood. We got researchers out of Australia who are saying that your past, though, doesn't have to define your future. Talk more about what some of the findings are here.
Yeah, so the study showed that even if someone experienced a childhood trauma, this did not mean that they were damaged for life. It could be just one chapter in a whole greater story. And that is the good news. If people get somebody who supports them, one person who believes in them, good community support, access to mental health and education, it can really change their story. In addition to post-traumatic growth, some people understand how the trauma impacts their life and life mission. So while we want parents to be aware of the damages of childhood trauma, we also want to let them know that it's not the end of the story. So it's really a hopeful study that's very promising and true.
Oh, that's really good advice there. Good to hear. Doctor, next up, we've been talking about aging just a moment ago with Dr. Patel. We've got another study here.
Yes.
This is funded by the National Institute on Aging. It says that people who regularly stress us out could be accelerating our biological aging. There's a term for them. It's called hasslers.
Yes.
Walk us through how to identify a hassler and how we could deal with them in our life.
Yeah, so a hassler is almost that slow, steady drip of somebody making your life difficult, either through nagging or drama, and it wears you down emotionally over time. And how it affects aging is we have something called epigenetics, which is the lifestyle aspect of our aging process. And if there are people in our emotional world that are stressing us out, it does have an impact on our genes and the stress level that we carry with us. So it's really good to think of it in terms of mental health hygiene. Who gets to stay in your life, who's supportive, and how do you put boundaries around those people who are more difficult so that you don't have to be as stressed out?
Here's something else that might help with stress, a viral trend that's supposed to help you beat that, especially if you're tight on time. We tease this, a 90-second reset. So what exactly goes into this reset?
This is great. So all you have to do is take a time out, close your eyes, maybe deep breathe for 90 seconds. It's almost a free reboot that you can give yourself so that you don't react to negative things in your world and you can be more proactive. You can shut down some of the stronger initial emotional reactions you have. And I always call it there's power in the pause. And this is the perfect example of it.
90 seconds. We can all fit that in. Dr. Robbie, good to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, war of words, conflicting messages from the Trump administration on just how long the violence in the Middle East will last. We're going to bring you the latest as we do expect to hear from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon moments from now. Back home, the pain at the pump is real. The price of oil soaring to highs not seen in years. It's all burning a new hole in many Americans' wallets at the gas station. But could prices fall just as fast as they've spiked? We are watching your bottom line in a bit. Plus, pack your patience. That spring break travel surge clashing with government shutdown woes, leaving weary airline passengers stuck in the middle, literally. You need to know if you're planning on hitting the skies in the coming weeks. And later in the hour, the major music industry settlement that's putting Live Nation back in the national spotlight. What the new Justice Department deal could mean for your next ticket purchase.
We've got some breaking news now to bring you in the war in the Middle East. We are going to start this hour with the latest on the war and new comments from President Trump, who has some mixed messages about how long this military action will last.
Our chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has the story. Peter, good morning.
Actually, we are going to go to our chief Capitol Hill correspondent, Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, if we've got you with us. Sahil, can you hear us? Okay, yes. Great. Hi, Sahil. Good morning. Thank you very much. So first, let's just discuss what we're just showing on our screen there. We're soon going to have a briefing from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, taking questions as he has from a news conference here. Just tell us what we're anticipating hearing from him.
Yes, Savannah, let me just start by setting the table here. There is a lot of work this administration has to do in terms of selling this war in Iran to the American public. A new NBC News poll finds that just 41% approve of President Trump's handling of the situation in Iran, while 54% disapprove. There's not been a concerted effort in the run-up to this war to convince Americans why it's necessary, what the goal is, what the plan is. I think these are all questions that Secretary Hegseth is on the hook to answer today, and he's going to get a lot of these questions. What is the U.S. strategy? How long is this war going to go? How much is it going to cost? Are they going to have to send a supplemental funding request to Congress? Are gas prices going to continue to rise? And it looks like we have Hegseth on the podium right now about to take questions, Savannah.
Let's listen
to
in.
Our fellow Americans, brave warriors, and steadfast allies, good morning. You know, as someone who led soldiers in the streets of Baghdad and Samarra, Iraq, and who trained counterinsurgents in Kabul, Afghanistan, and who still carries the weight of brothers lost to Iranian terrorist proxies, many backed by the same Iranian regime we're confronting now. This fight, Operation Epic Fury, it hits home. Our generation understands this fight. For 47 years, these barbaric savages in the Iranian regime have murdered our brothers in arms, my guys, your guys, our guys, through their terrorist proxies and cowardly attacks. Now they race toward a nuclear bomb to hold the world hostage. The Iranians have targeted and killed thousands of my American brothers. That race to a nuclear bomb, President Trump will never allow it. Not now, not ever, not on our watch. The mullahs are desperate and scrambling. Like the terrorist cowards they are, they fire missiles from schools and hospitals, deliberately targeting innocents, because they know their military is being systematically degraded and annihilated. Iran's neighbors, and in some cases, former allies in the Gulf, they've abandoned them. And their proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas, either broken, ineffective, or on the sidelines. Iran stands alone, and they are badly losing. On day 10 of Operation Epic Fury, we are winning with an overwhelming and unrelenting focus on our objectives, which are the same as the day I gave my first briefing here on Operation Epic Fury. They're straightforward, and we are executing them with ruthless precision. One, destroy their missile stockpiles, their missile launchers, and their defense industrial base, missiles and their ability to make them. Two, destroy their Navy. And three, permanently deny Iran nuclear weapons forever. It's a laser-focused, maximum authority mission delivered with overwhelming and unrelenting precision. No hesitation, no half measures. As President Trump declared yesterday, we're crushing the enemy in an overwhelming display of technical skill and military force. We will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. But we do so on our timeline and at our choosing. For example, today will be yet again our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. The most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes. Intelligence more refined and better than ever. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, the last 24 hours have seen Iran fire the lowest number of missiles they've been capable of firing yet. Just the bifurcation, just the trend lines that we talked about on our first briefing. You see, this is not 2003. This is not endless nation building under those types of quagmires we saw under Bush or Obama. It's not even close. Our generation of soldier will not let that happen again, and nor will this president, who very clearly ran against those kinds of never-ending, nebulously scoped missions. Those days are dead. Instead, we're winning decisively with brutal efficiency, total air dominance, and an unbreakable will to accomplish the president's objectives on our timeline. We stay locked on the target because here at the Department of War, that's our job. Now, the chairman and I, having just returned from Dover last night, our troops and their families and the enormous sacrifice that they make is certainly heavy on my mind. So I'll close with scripture, drawing strength from Psalm 144. Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. He is my loving God and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield, in whom I take refuge. May the Lord grant unyielding strength and refuge to our warriors, unbreakable protection to them and our homeland, and total victory over those who seek to harm them. And amen. God bless our troops and this mission. Mr. Chairman, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm here today to continue the updates to the American people and to those in the room on Operation Epic Fury. First, let me start with honoring our fallen. As the Secretary said, on Saturday and again last night at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, our nation's leaders honored our returning fallen as they arrived home for their final time. Last week, I shared a few of the names, and today I want to share the rest. Major Jeffrey O'Brien and Chief Warrant Officer 3 Robert Marzan were the final two fallen to return home and members of the U.S. Army Reserve's 103rd Sustainment Command out of Des Moines, Iowa. Last night, as the news has been reporting, we honored the return of Staff Sergeant Benjamin Pennington of the U.S. Army's 1st Space Brigade from Fort Carson, Colorado. When I met Ben's family last night, his mom, his dad, and his sister, they showed me a picture, a drawing that Ben had made when he was in kindergarten. It was clear all the way back then that Ben wanted to do one thing in his life, and he wanted to serve his country and be a soldier. And to the Penningtons, just know how Ben was absolutely a great one. And finally, Major Sorfleet Davies, who returned home this weekend after sadly passing away from a medical condition while on duty in Kuwait. We welcome him home as well and mourn with his family. To the families and the families of all of our fallen, we share in your profound grief. The Joint Force remains eternally grateful for your sacrifice and the gift of a great example that your service members have given all of us. I want you to know that their names will never be forgotten, and you and your family are part of our Joint Force family forever. Let me talk a little bit about the progress thus far, acknowledging that Admiral Cooper will likely continue to give updates from CENTCOM. As the Secretary said, we're in the 10th, moving into the 11th day of Operation Epic Fury. The Joint Force remains focused on 3 military objectives: continue to destroy Iranian ballistic missiles and drone capability in order to prevent attacks on the U.S. and others throughout the region. And this means attacking launch sites, command and control nodes, stockpiles before they can threaten our personnel, our facilities, and our partners. Second, we continue to strike the Iranian Navy and their capabilities in order to do things like sustain movement through the Straits of Hormuz. And third, we continue to start working on and going deeper into Iran's military and industrial base in order to prevent the regime from being able to attack Americans, our interests, and our partners for years to come and project power outside their borders. This means servicing production facilities, research and development sites, and infrastructure. Let me turn to the map. We're going to try digital today to prevent laser injury. Since our last update, CENTCOM continues to make progress across the southern flank. To date, they've struck more than 5,000 targets. U.S. Strategic Command bombers recently dropped dozens of 2,000-pound GPS-penetrating weapons on deeply buried missile launchers across the southern flank. We also have struck several one-way drone factories to get at the heart of their autonomous capability. And of course, alongside our regional partners along the southern flank, continue to execute intercepts against one-way attack drones using fighters and attack helicopters. Our strikes mean we've made significant progress in reducing the number of missile and drone attacks out of Iran. Ballistic missile attacks continue to trend downward, 90% from where they've started, and one-way attack drones have decreased 83% since the beginning of the operation. A testament to our air defenders and our air defense systems, and as I said, our partners in the region continue to do great work as well. Second, we're making substantial progress towards destroying the Navy. In the first 10 days of the conflict, we're more than 50 Iranian naval ships into the campaign using a combination of artillery, fighters, bombers, and sea-launched missiles. As Admiral Cooper noted last Thursday, we struck and sank an Iranian drone carrier ship, and U.S. CENTCOM continues today to hunt and strike mine-laying vessels and mine storage facilities. This work will continue. Third, against our objectives, we've begun to target Iran's military and industrial complex, again, focusing on centers of gravity to get upstream of the shooters out in the field in order to deny them the ability to continue to generate those one-way attack drones. Let me spend a minute talking about the joint force. Across the area of responsibility, this is gritty and tireless work, and I cannot begin to explain how incredibly proud I am of the extraordinary courage, tenacity, and grit and professionalism within the joint force. Last time I had a chance to talk about the Army's incredible logisticians who are out there sustaining the fight. Today I want to highlight a few groups of sailors. First, I want to thank the men and women of the Ford Carrier Strike Group and their families, and let all of them know how grateful I am for their leadership and service. The crews on board this strike group have already been endured months at sea, only to get their deployment extended. These exceptional Americans, rogered up, all supported by their families, continue to stand the watch, taking the fight to the enemy over and over again, night after night. Aboard ships like the USS Ford and the Abraham Lincoln are a special group of sailors I want to highlight today. These are the men and women, the sailors up on the roof running operations on the flight deck. With an average age of the early 20s, these are the unsung heroes of naval aviation. These young sailors, known for wearing yellow shirts, are in charge of the catapults, taxiing jets around on the flight deck, shooting jets off the front end, and recovering jets off the back end. They are literally involved with every single movement on the roof on an aircraft carrier. They are the last ones that a naval aviator sees before getting shot off the front end, and the first one that a naval aviator sees after safely trapping on the back end. And just for a minute, imagine you're standing on that aircraft carrier flight deck. There's 30 knots of wind in your face. The deck is slippery, covered in grease. It's noisy. There are propellers spinning. There's jet blast everywhere. The helicopters are running. Your head is on a swivel, and you're trying to direct a multi-million-dollar fighter into a 1-foot square box so that those naval aviators can be shot off into the black of night to go do America's work. Those jets are fully loaded with missiles and bombs, and they are a world-class team combined with the naval aviation. and the aviators in those jets. This beautiful symphony of American spirit is the definition of perfectly organized chaos. And these crews do it every single time the carrier is at work. Oh, by the way, in the middle of the night and oftentimes in the pouring rain. These are dedicated young people who take the road less traveled to serve their great nation, doing the deeds that we need them to do. America's enlisted force is the pride of every nation's military, certainly ours, and the envy of every other one as well. Each and every one of them out there across the joint force are extraordinary, and in particular today I want to highlight the yellow shirts. Ladies and gentlemen, our work continues. It'll continue to be difficult. I ask every American to keep our deployed force and their families in our thoughts. Combat deployments can be tough on the force and the families, and it's important that we continue to remember that. I remain deeply humbled by the 2.8 million members of the Joint Force, and I'll end where I started, and that's remembering our fallen and their families whose sacrifice will be felt forever. And with that, I'll take some questions with the Secretary.
A beautiful symphony of American spirit. Well said, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, sir.
And I will just note that no other country in the world is capable of executing what the chairman just described, day after day, night after night, unrelenting. Well said. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Alexandra Ingersoll, One America News. You talked, Mr. Secretary, you talked at the conference in Florida on Thursday that there was a 90% missile capabilities degradation and 83% drone degradation, and I know the chairman just repeated those numbers. We've seen the most amount of fighting these past 5 days. Is there any update to those percentages? And also, are you able to give any quantification of degradation to the enemy's nuclear capabilities yet?
What those numbers represent is a persistent low ability to respond, which is what we're looking for, right? It's if the enemy can simply wait and then project power, that's problematic. And we've seen some spurts here or there, but ultimately the trend lines, if you look at the charts that we look at every day, have gone like this down to a flat. That doesn't mean they won't be able to project. It doesn't mean our air defenders still don't have to defend. They do, but that is strong evidence of degradation, along with the battle damage assessment that the Joint Staff does, which takes time. You've got to look at imagery and recognize whether something's been simply degraded or it's been destroyed, or whether an underground facility has been collapsed or completely obliterated. So there's differences in how you evaluate that, but the numbers staying that low is a demonstration of the efficacy for sure. Yeah, Ryan.
Thanks, Mr. Secretary. There's been reports that the new leader of Iran has been wounded. Do you know if this is true and what his condition is? And then another one, President Trump said he had a really good call with President Putin yesterday. Will Russia be aiding us in this conflict, and can you share anything on that?
Well, the president, as I've said before, maintains strong relationships with world leaders, which creates opportunities and options for us in very dynamic ways. So the president said it was a good call. I was not on it, but those that were said it was a strong call, reaffirming hopefully the opportunity for some peace in Russia, Ukraine, and also a recognition that as it pertains to this conflict, they should not be involved. The first question was
on the new leader of Iran. There's reports that he's been wounded.
Oh, the new leader of Iran. He would be wise to heed the words of our president, which is to not pursue nuclear weapons and come out and state as such. As far as his status, that's not something I can comment on right now. Yeah, right here.
Correct. Mr. Secretary, Eric Schmidt with the New York Times. A question for you first. Last week, you talked about this being the beginnings of an air campaign that could last 3 to 8 weeks. Can you give us your assessment on where we are now? And Mr. Chairman, in any conflict, the enemy or the adversary adapts to the tactics it faces. Can you talk about the most challenging adaptation the Iranian military has made to the U.S. military? What challenges are you facing most right now? Thank you.
I appreciate the question. Where we are is in a very strong place, giving the President of the United States maximum options. And from the beginning, from this podium, we haven't stated how long it will take. Our will is endless. Ultimately, the President gets to determine the end state of those objectives, right? But what he's said continually, and I want the American people to understand, is this is not endless. It's not protracted. We're not allowing mission creep. The President has set a very specific mission to accomplish. And our job is to unrelentingly deliver that. Now, he gets to control the throttle. He's the one deciding, he's the one elected on behalf of the American people when we're achieving those particular objectives. And so it's not for me to posit whether it's the beginning, the middle, or the end. That's his, and he'll continue to communicate that. What we serve him as is we give him updates on a daily basis of exactly where we are so he can make that determination on the throttle. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the question on adaptation. As you're right, no plan survives first contact with the enemy or Murphy. They're adapting, as are we. Of course, we have very entrepreneurial warfighters out there. I'd rather not, for operational security reasons, tell them what's working. So I'm going to not answer that question based on that. But we are watching what they're doing, and we are adapting faster than they are.
Are they more formidable than you anticipated, General?
I mean, I think they're fighting, and I respect that, but I don't think they're more formidable than what we thought.
Secretary Arzate, thank you. Jordan Conrad's from the Gateway Pundit. Axios reported, citing U.S. and Israeli sources, that the U.S. was not happy with strikes on 30 fuel depots in Iran. While this is anonymous sourcing, it seems kind of congruent with what President Trump said yesterday, that there's certain spots they don't want to hit relating to energy infrastructure that would take a long time to rebuild. And whether this reporting is true or not, what's your message to Americans, those who supported the president and those who aren't really in favor of this war and who worry that Israel might be taking advantage of the U.S.'s backing? And then for Mr. Chairman, for you, I wanted to ask, when you say that we're moving inland, what capabilities does Iran have to shoot down jets over their land? And would that trigger some kind of rescue operation that could risk a bigger ground operation?
Well, I would just state by saying Israel's been a really strong partner in this effort. Where they have different objectives, they've pursued them. Ultimately, we've stayed focused on ours. But what Iran has felt is the power of the world's two most powerful air forces. In that particular case, those weren't our strikes or that objective, or that wasn't necessarily our objective. But the president has made it clear to those concerns that we're not getting pulled in any direction. We're leading. The president is leading. He's determining where we want to go, what the outcome will be, what the end state is, with a very keen eye. And I understand those concerns because I've heard from a lot of people who I went through 20 years of those wars myself. Worried about getting dragged in, worried about mission creep, worried about nation building or democracy expansion. That's never the perspective the president has pursued on this. Just because previous presidents and previous secretaries have decided to just pour more resources and more people in toward some unguided end state doesn't mean that's the way the world needs to look today. In fact, the American people voted for a different approach. But what the president also stated from the beginning was Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. And it's one thing to say it. It's easy to say. Anybody can say that. I mean, Barack Obama said that. But to do something about it takes courage and resolve. But in that courage and in that resolve, you can also be very scoped in what you're trying to execute to ensure that the sacrifice of Americans, American treasure, American lives, all of those properly meet the objective that you're trying to accomplish. And certainly, as someone I talked out front about what the Iranians have done to our generation, yes, we're clear-eyed about it. But my job is to keep it scoped, given the directive to the president to accomplish the mission.
Thank you for the question. Most of their higher-end surface-to-air missile systems are not factors at this point in time. We're able to move around fighters that are moving deeper with relative impunity. Always some risk out there. I don't want to say that there isn't, and we'll always maintain and retain capability of doing search and rescue type of things. But I don't want to get into the details. But thank you for the question.
Shelley.
Thanks, Mr. Secretary. President Trump told our team on the ground early this morning that the thing that has surprised him the most during the course of this operation so far has been the Iranian regime attacking countries that are not attacking them. I'm curious if that surprised you as well. And General, curious if you are open to the possibility of escorting vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, and if you could describe some of the challenges of doing so.
Big mistake by the Iranian regime to start targeting its neighbors right away, exposing who they are and what they're all about, indiscriminate targeting, flailing recklessly at the beginning. I can't say that we anticipated necessarily that's exactly how they would react, but we knew it was a possibility. And I think it was a demonstration of the desperation of that regime then and that regime now, that they still think their pathway out is to try to alienate their Arab partners even more, who've instead decided to come to us and have been willing to go on the offense, have been giving us access, spacing, and overflight in a new partnership that will continue to remake the region the way that President Trump did with the Abraham Accords. So you're pushing those countries in our direction to support this effort, further alienating Iran. And I think it's worth underscoring. I see in the media banners that say, war expanding or war spread. It's actually the opposite. It's actually quite contained, and more of those countries are coming on side, recognizing that you can't live under a conventional umbrella with nuclear ambitions with a radical regime like that. Again, properly scoping the objectives in the process. And then you want to talk about the Strait?
Sure. On the potential, if tasked to escort, we'll look at the range of options to set the military conditions to be able to do that. And then, like we always do with every potential mission, come to the Secretary and the President with both what are the resources required, what is the command and control required, and what are the risks, and how do we mitigate those risks. So we're looking at a range of options there, and we'll figure out how to solve problems as they come to us.
But I would reiterate also to add to what the chairman said, the truth the President posted last night about that, saying if Iran does anything to stop the flow of oil within the Strait of Hormuz, they will be hit by the United States of America 20 times harder than they have been hit thus far. He goes on to say death, fire, and fury will rain upon them. You've seen the truth and read it. But he takes very seriously the condition of that straits. We have capabilities that no other nation on earth has, and we're certainly working with our energy partners across the administration to control for that. That's part of that scoping of this. The world needs to understand this doesn't have, this isn't intended to be, nor is it something that will expand. We know exactly what we're attempting to achieve here, scoped properly, and the American people can count on that for sure.
Thank you so much, Secretary Hegseth. President Trump has long said that he wants to minimize the loss of life in war, which wherever it occurs in whatever country, which so many people obviously appreciate. Can you detail the specific measures the Pentagon is taking to minimize civilian casualties and strikes inside Iran? And secondarily, is the Pentagon prioritizing replenishment of precision-guided munitions, long-range strike weapons, or air defense interceptors? And can you share any details on which systems are being prioritized?
Yeah, seeing it from the inside every single day, including this, no nation takes more precautions to ensure there's never targeting of civilians than the United States of America. From the boat strikes in the Caribbean, where every single strike is assessed to this campaign here, no nation in the history of warfare has ever attempted in every way possible to avoid civilian casualties. And frankly, that's a point that just isn't appreciated enough. Where things happen that need to be investigated, we will investigate to the question shouted in the back. That it's not open source is not the place to determine what did or did not happen. We take things very, very seriously and investigate them thoroughly, which takes time, and which is why it does take time. But ultimately, unlike Iran, who targets civilians indiscriminately, who we've seen in the intel moving rocket launchers into civilian neighborhoods, near schools, near hospitals, to try to prevent our ability to strike. That's how they operate. And then they set the targeting of drones and missiles toward civilian targets, hospitals, hotels, airports. CENTCOM's been very good about putting that information out. That's how terrorist regimes fight. They target civilians. We do not. And I can tell you this administration and this Pentagon focuses on that very, very closely.
Does it have Tomahawk missiles? Does that mean you will hold someone accountable if it turns out that that was a
This
US
morning,
munition
the Iranian government is saying a lot. They continue to say they're prepared for a long war. If that's the case, what could you tell the American people as far as the steps the Department of War is taking to make sure our troops have the protection and the resources they need as the mission continues?
I think there's one thing I can sleep quietly at night knowing is that we're giving every resource humanly possible to our troops on the front lines to ensure they're protected. In fact, as I said in that first press briefing, even before we set the offense, we set the defense. We made sure we had the ability to defend, and then we moved as many Americans off the bases and into other places as possible. So as this progresses, the chairman, or the question was asked of the chairman about how the enemy adapts. Well, of course, we adapt too in real time. And to watch our warriors iterate on air defense and interdiction, on drones and missiles and how we get after it, it's incredible how they refine the tactics, bring in new assets to find different ways of getting at emerging technologies. So that is one of the things we're laser focused on every day. Yes, we're going on offense more effectively than any country in human history, but we're also ensuring that in every way possible we're defending the best Americans we have who wear our uniform, no doubt. Let's do one more.
Thanks, Secretary Hegseth. The president has indicated that maybe the operation will wrap up sooner than he thought it was going to. What's the plan once the U.S. stops military action? Will the U.S. play a role in the aftermath, or will they leave Iran to sort it out?
Ultimately, the aftermath is going to be in America's interests, our interests. We won't live under a nuclear blackmail scenario of conventional missiles that can target our people, which is why the objectives have been scoped from the beginning. Missiles, missile production, a defense industrial base, Navy, all in service of ensuring they don't have nuclear power projection capabilities. That's what matters to President Trump. That's what matters to the American people. And ultimately, that's why we're so laser focused on ensuring those objectives and those objectives alone are met. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
An update from the Pentagon there as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declares today will be the most intense day of strikes as the war with Iran enters its 11th day. Let's get analysis here. Bring in our senior national political reporter, Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, we'll talk about with our military analyst in just a moment, but let's talk about the politics right now, because there are a lot of questions about the timeline with gas prices rising so rapidly here in America. Heading into the morning, there were a lot of mixed reports about the timeline, with the Trump administration both declaring the end is near, but also this is just beginning. The defense secretary was asked about that timeline today. Did we get any clarity?
We did not get a lot of clarity, Joe. Now, you mentioned the politics. That's an important level set to look at this through, the entire lens of this situation, because Secretary Hegseth and President Trump do have a lot of questions to answer Americans that they are not currently sold on in terms of what the U.S. objective is, what the strategy is, how long this will take. Now, the length of time, Secretary Hegseth spoke about this. He said the U.S. is in a very strong place and that he's giving the president maximum options here. He said he hasn't stated, and the U.S. has not stated, how long this will take. That's important. He said America's will is endless, and that he repeated this multiple times. Ultimately, it's up to President Trump to decide, passing the buck there to the commander-in-chief, essentially saying it's not his job as Secretary of Defense to decide how long this will go. But he did insist it won't be endless, it won't be protracted, it won't be mission creep, and suggested it won't be like 2003, which is an allusion to the Iraq War, which lasted well over a decade. But beyond that, there are no specifics. Will this last days? Will this last weeks? At what point is he going to advise President Trump to pull back? At what point will the U.S. have achieved its objectives? What Secretary Hegseth also did say is that the U.S. won't live under a nuclear blackmail scenario. And they essentially not only want to destroy the stockpiles of weapons that Iran has, but they want to destroy its ability to build a nuclear weapon. How do they get Iran to unlearn that ability? Again, there are a lot of questions here that kind of get to this bigger picture point of how long this war will take, and does the U.S. have an end game here?
All right, Sahil Kapoor, thank you very much. Let's now bring in NBC News military analyst Colonel Steve Warren to help us here understand what we just learned from a military perspective. Joe mentioned just a moment ago, we heard from the defense secretary saying today will be the most intense day of strikes. We also got an update on the degradation of their ballistic missile and drone capabilities. Also interesting to hear the commentary there on the potential we've heard about of the U.S. escorting oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, essentially that a lot would need to be done in order to get that into a place that would be safe. What do you make of this operational update, Colonel?
Sure. I think the chairman of the Joint Chiefs gave us some useful and actionable information during his update. Things that really stood out to me. You know, he talked a little bit about the Navy. He mentioned that so far we've destroyed 50 Iranian naval vessels. He also mentioned, which I thought was very notable, there's a focus now on mine-laying vessels and on mine storage facilities. And, of course, mines are a significant potential threat to the Strait of Hormuz. We haven't seen any evidence or any reporting that the Iranians have mined that strait. But if the Iranians were to mine that strait, it would be highly problematic. So notable that the military is focusing on the naval capabilities and on the mine storage. Also of note, the chairman mentioned that he is focusing some of his efforts on Iranian industry, right? The chairman reminded us what the military objectives are, the missiles, drones, launch, command and control, and also stockpiles and capability, the Navy, and then finally the industrial base, production and research and development. So what the chairman signaled to us, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs signaled to us, is that he is now beginning to work on that portion of the target list, the industrial base, the production capabilities, and the research and development capabilities.
All right, Colonel Steve Warren, thank you very much. We've got more to come on this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Back with our top story, the war in the Middle East. The Iranian Red Crescent says more than 1,200 people have been killed in Iran as the United States and Israel launch more strikes on the country this morning. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said earlier today that this will be the most intense day of strikes on Iran.
Iran continues to retaliate. Among the targets coming under fire are Gulf Arab countries like Bahrain and Kuwait. The ongoing escalation comes after President Trump delivered more mixed signals about the war. The president initially suggested it could end soon before later adding the U.S. was going to go further.
NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv. So, Matt, despite these mixed messages, the president might be looking to end the war soon given the turmoil in oil markets. But Israel's prime minister might not be on the same page, right? I mean, tell us what we're hearing from him about all this, how long it might last.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we're hearing from as of last night, the prime minister reacting directly to President Trump's comments saying that they were going to maybe wind up the war fairly soon. Prime Minister Netanyahu saying they're going to continue to pummel Iran. But my conversations with those who are close to the security establishment here in Israel say that, and it might be obvious to our audience, but we're hearing this directly, that the United States and Israel have different objectives. The United States is much more pressed trying to achieve regime change here, whereas others, like Israel, are hoping more for just simply removing the regime, removing the threat, constraining Iran's ballistic missile capability, its nuclear program, and its funding for proxy groups throughout the Middle East. The Israelis don't necessarily have the same optimistic belief that they can mold Iran into their image. They're simply trying to neuter Iran and keep it from attacking its neighbors and attacking Israel. So it's different levels of objectives here, and one that for Israel means they will continue to attack Iran. We've got to remember, when we're hearing from President Trump saying that they might be winding this up or that this might be over soon, it's unclear whether or not he's going to stick to that. The president has been has been speaking out of both sides of his mouth on this issue ever since this war began. So one particular comment doesn't necessarily mean a shift in policy.
Matt, we also want to ask you about that strike on an Iranian elementary school that killed many, many children. NBC News has now obtained and verified a video, and it appears to show an American Tomahawk missile hitting that area of the school on the date that this happened, on February 28th. What are we learning about this attack from munitions experts, and what is the latest we're hearing from the U.S. government?
Well, I mean, the fact is that munitions experts and even assessments from within the U.S. government had for so long already been saying that the evidence is sky high that this was a U.S. attack. And meanwhile, we've been hearing from, as we just heard from Hegseth now, the Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense, saying that they are investigating, that they're trying to do a good job, encouraging people not to jump to conclusions. But the fact is that we've already heard from weapons experts. We've already seen these images. We've already heard from, internal government assessments essentially saying that the Iranians didn't have those capabilities and wouldn't have done that, and that this almost was certainly done by the United States.
All right. Matt Bradley reporting from Israel. Matt, thank you.
Well, without a clear end date for the war with Iran, there are new questions about when Iran's weapons supply will run out. It comes as several countries across the Middle East continue to intercept Iranian missiles and drones. And some experts say the type and quantity of Iran's arsenal could determine how long this war lasts. NBC News international correspondent Hala Gorani takes a closer look.
When the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran February 28th, Iran responded with its own missiles and drones,
hitting Israel and U.S. bases, but also Gulf Arab countries, a fuel depot at Kuwait Airport, an oil refinery in Bahrain, a luxury hotel in Dubai. One of the questions as we enter week 2 of the conflict, how much of its arsenal does Iran have left?
Before the war, they were estimated to have around 2,000 or more medium-range ballistic missiles, that is, missiles that Iran could fire from its own territory to hit Israel, and about 400-plus launchers.
Israel and the U.S. claim to have destroyed hundreds of those missiles and launchers, as well as manufacturing facilities. But Iran has a significant shorter-range missile stockpile, and that number is harder to estimate. Those are missiles that travel a few hundred kilometers and can hit U.S. bases and other targets in the Arabian Gulf. Their number perhaps still in the thousands, according to experts we spoke with, and are sometimes challenging to target from the air.
Now, if it is on the surface, if it is not hardened, then that's going to be much easier to target. But a lot of this stuff, the Iranians, learning from their friends, the North Koreans, have put underground.
Could Iran get help from countries like Russia and China, known diplomatic allies, but their willingness to help Iran militarily still unclear? In an NBC interview Sunday, the Iranian foreign minister says that's the hope.
Military cooperation between Iran and Russia is not something new. It's not a secret. It has been in the past and is still there and will continue in the future.
Another weapon that has become a mainstay of modern warfare, the unsophisticated but lethal drone, a classic feature of so-called asymmetric warfare, in which the weaker side uses cheaper weapons to hit unconventional targets like fuel tanks or airports.
There are suicide drones, which Iran calls them, or typically called one-way attack drones, that are used to attack fixed or mobile land-based targets. Mm-hmm. But Iran has also significant capabilities in terms of anti-ship drones.
And though Iran is burning through its missiles and drones, countries across the region are depleting their expensive air defense interceptors, while the U.S. and Israel are spending hundreds of millions per day on their war against Iran. How quickly those assets are used up could also shape the war's trajectory.
All right, our thanks to Hala for that report. Moving from Iran to Capitol Hill for a closer look at what else is making headlines in the world of politics. Divisions are growing among Senate Republicans about how to pass President Trump's controversial voter ID legislation. NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor is that and more. Sahil, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah and Joe. We begin today in politics with Senate Republicans splintering over the path forward on President Trump's Save America Act, the sweeping election bill imposing proof of citizenship requirements and voter ID rules to cast a ballot. Some proponents of the bill say they are convinced a so-called talking filibuster can get around the 60-vote hurdle and lead to passage, but the Senate Majority Leader John Thune emphasized that the path is unclear and that it's hard to see this tactic working, given that it hasn't worked in the past. Another Republican senator proposed a different budgetary path to cut out Democrats, but his colleagues fear this approach is even less likely to succeed. This, as Trump is calling for further revisions to the bill, including stricter election rules and unrelated restrictions on transgender athletes and surgeries for minors. Meanwhile, the FBI has subpoenaed records from Arizona's Maricopa County and was given those documents, according to a top Republican in the state's Senate. This indicates a widening investigation by the Bureau into the 2020 election, which the president lost, but continues to falsely claim he won. The FBI, which is led by Trump ally and Director Kash Patel, recently seized election material in Fulton County, Georgia. What do these two counties have in common? Both are Democratic strongholds in two key swing states that the president lost to Joe Biden in 2020. The FBI did not return NBC's request for comment. And finally, a future presidential prospect, Senator Cory Booker, is about to introduce a bill to make the first $75,000 in income for couples tax-free by massively expanding the standard deduction on federal returns. For single filers, it would be half that amount, which is more than double of what it is today. In an interview, Booker told me it would have a significant impact in raising disposable incomes for average Americans. He also said that while he's currently focused on running for re-election to the Senate this fall, he wants Democrats to be the party of big ideas again, and that he isn't closing the door on a presidential run in 2028. And that is a look at what's making news in politics today. Savannah, Joe?
All right, thanks, Sahil. Coming up, a fiery AI legal battle is shaping up with the Trump administration now in one company's crosshairs. After the break, we're going to dig into the White House's thorny history with one major name and the new lawsuits that could shake up the industry's relationship with America's government. That's next. Back with the growing legal battle between the Trump administration and the major AI company Anthropic. Yesterday, the company filed 2 lawsuits against the U.S. Defense Department and other federal agencies. It's accusing the government of unlawful retaliation. This comes after months of tense negotiations that failed to reach a contract deal. Anthropic wanted certain safety guarantees on how the military would use its advanced AI systems, but the Pentagon refused. Last week, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth labeled Anthropic a national security threat, banning the agency from using its products. President Trump ordered all federal agencies to stop using its services. Let's bring in NBC News AI fellow Jared Perlow for more on this dispute. Jared, good to have you with us. So one lawsuit in California, the other filed in Washington. Walk us through what the company is alleging here.
Yeah, so I think zooming out, this is the first time we've seen one of America's largest AI companies sue the federal government in this way. This is kind of crossing the Rubicon. We've never seen this before. So what Anthropic is saying is there was basically 2 red lines that they didn't want the government to use its AI systems for mass domestic surveillance and use directly in lethal autonomous weapons, basically killer robots. They didn't agree with the Pentagon on that, with the Trump administration, so now the Trump administration is basically trying to get rid of them entirely. Anthropic is saying, quote, that's an unlawful campaign of retaliation, and its reputation and core First Amendment freedoms are currently under attack as a result. So they filed 2 lawsuits just because of the way the law works. But it's interesting to see that Anthropic at the same time says it wants to continue supporting America's national security in the way that its systems are currently being used in the Pentagon.
Big picture, why is this such a big deal? What is it people need to understand about this?
Yeah, so I think critical message here is this isn't just contract minutia. You know, I think AI systems are advancing so quickly. These are not your grandfather's AI systems, not even the same AI systems from 5 months ago. And the key question here is who should be able to set the rules for this incredibly powerful technology? Should it be the private companies that have their own usage policies, or should it be the federal government theoretically, taking their marching orders from elected Democratic representatives? So that's kind of at the core of this issue right here. But I think what's fascinating is also the government's seeming behavior here of retaliation. So never before have we seen the federal government basically have a dispute with this AI company and then decide to basically cut off all business, basically in the words of one former White House person, nuke the company, saying not only do we disagree with you, but we're going to basically eviscerate your ability to do business. And it's been interesting to see other companies like OpenAI, like Google, basically close ranks and say that Anthropic should not have been labeled a threat to national security, that this is totally unprecedented.
So officially, the Pentagon is saying it doesn't comment on litigation as a matter of public policy, but we know the Trump administration has talked about this. What have we heard from the administration?
At length. And so this is very fast moving at the same time. So I'll just read what a White House spokesperson told me yesterday. They said, quote, under the Trump administration, our military will obey the United States Constitution, not any woke AI company's terms of service. Again, taking issue with the fact that Anthropic wanted to impose its terms of service here. But we also saw breaking news last night that the White House is preparing an executive order that will further ban Anthropic systems from other government use in the Treasury Department, in the State Department. So this is kind of a scorched earth battle that I think we're just starting to see unfold here.
Will likely play out in the courts here. All right, Jared, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Other major money news now. It's about to get a little easier to get your hands on some of those popular weight loss drugs. NBC News business and economy reporter Emily Lorsch has your Money Minute. Emily, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. It's a major deal in the booming weight loss drug market. Novo Nordisk says it will sell its blockbuster medications Wegovy and Ozempic
through the telehealth platform Hims and Hers Health, ending a legal dispute over copycat compounded versions of the drugs. The drug maker filed a suit against Hims earlier this year. Hims will now offer the FDA-approved treatments at the same price as other telehealth platforms and stop advertising compounded GLP-1 drugs. Over at Tesla, another high-profile departure. Sendil Pilani, the company's vice president of finance, says he's leaving after 17 years with the electric vehicle maker. His exit comes as Tesla shifts focus toward AI, robotaxis, and humanoid robots. Several senior leaders have recently departed as the company faces slowing EV sales, rising competition, and backlash tied to CEO Elon Musk's political activities. And according to an exclusive new travel trends report from AARP, older Americans are planning another big year of travel and using AI to plan their trips. Nearly 2/3 of adults 50 and older expect to travel in 2026, taking on average about 4 trips. While fewer travelers are setting cost as a barrier for traveling this year compared to previous years, it does remain the top concern. Many are turning to technology to stretch their budgets. According to the report, the use of AI tools for travel planning has doubled in the past year, and 44% of these older Americans surveyed, Joe, they say that they use AI in order to find the best travel deals. So it seems like some of these older Americans have got that AI figured out.
And what better way to use it than that?
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, Emily. Appreciate it. Coming up, forget the triple dipper. One loving couple is perfectly fine with a double dipper, the viral Chili's engagement that's giving a whole new meaning to airport pickup. That is next on Morning News Now. Finally this hour, they met by chance at a Chili's restaurant at O'Hare Airport a few years back. Now the couple is making it official, and I bet you can guess where. Reporter Lexi Sutter from our affiliate in Chicago has the story behind the viral proposal.
This moment was nearly 3 years in the making.
It wasn't until he started speaking very sincerely and I saw a bit of a red carpet that I realized, wait, everyone's looking at us. That's what's happening. I knew in that moment he's proposing.
Robert Schnetz and Sarah Doss met in 2023 by chance, both on layovers at O'Hare and both sitting at the Chili's bar. Sarah struck up a quick conversation, and then they went to their separate planes.
I gave her my LinkedIn, and then I land, and I have a message in my LinkedIn DMs from her with her phone number.
Robert returned that message, and after nearly 3 years of dating, he knew he had to propose where it all started. To get Sarah back to O'Hare, he lied about a weekend work trip in Chicago, asking her to tag along.
My friends had flown in that morning from LA. They flew in at like 7 a.m. to get there. At noon, set everything up. We start heading over, and I see on the screens our slideshows playing. And I thought, oh no, she's gonna know before we get there.
I did not see it. I saw a crowd and I heard live music and I said, oh, that's so special. Live music. It's a big airport. Of course there is. There must be some event happening.
The event? Her very own engagement.
I look over and there's 50 people in front of us recording. And then I look to the left. Everybody in Chili's has their phones out.
Sharing their love story with the world, they say, only makes this milestone that much sweeter.
We laugh all of the time. We just enjoy our life together, and to be able to share and joy with other people is a really special thing.
Our thanks to Lexi Sutter for bringing us that story. That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now, but don't go anywhere. The news continues after this.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.